and I say, hit this button. This is going to go into the start shopping, as it were. So we're now going to do a new page. We go into the servlet. This servlet's done some pretty funny stuff. Number one, it's generated an order ID, part of which is my name and part of which is a number. This is probably one of the trickier things. Not the place to start. Let's come back to that. It's also taken the same array of items and displayed them as fields in a table. So obviously one row for each item and one column for each field. And the last field is where the user can select how many of these they want to buy. I want one egg roll, I want 2 spring rolls, and I want 1 beef ginger. Okay? These are all drop downs. You can make them entry fields. So if you make them entry fields, you might type data. It's harder to make an input error with this flat than with an entry. Okay, so now I've made my selection. There's a lot going on in these pages, and we'll come back and talk about how to do it. In particular, how to build this number. Now I'm going to place my order, and it's displaying my order. Build an order. The name roll. Take 2 spring rolls. Notice these things are all formatted by Slate's currency, and it's added up and calculated the total in the JSP page. We've done some processing in the JSP page. We haven't wrote the MVC, but we only processed it in order to display it. Didn't feed anything back in the model here. I'm not breaking MVC. Well, clearly something in the model there would probably bring up a little price as well. And there's our order number. We carry forward. Clearly that's stored somewhere. Clearly our order is being stored somewhere. So I have a choice. I can confirm, in which case I get a nice little message. Let me run it again as someone else and make a different order. And, well, that's coming up. I'm going to pass the appendix around. And your name is Ewan? Ewan. Okay, Ewan, you're gonna be the next customer. L-I-W-N? Oops, I typed them, didn't know anywhere. Okay, you're gonna place an order. Look what's happened to the order number. You don't have to eat it. What do you want?
Roasted duck. Roast duck.
Roast duck.
Roast duck.
No! Let's have 2 of those. Okay? Here's your order.
Sure.
You go, oh my gosh, that's $44. I can't afford that. And then you cancel. And then we would have got the other message. I'll be one more.
Lucky the racer.
And you are
P-I. R-A-N.
you're in.
Oh,
Yeah, ER. There's an E in there somewhere.
T-I.
Okay. Okay.
Come on.
So you're going to place an order.
Some of the integer is limited.
Noodle soup.
The third one. Empty. 1 to 3.
One noodle soup.
Okay.
One
For
bowl.
that. If you want to confirm it,
Yeah.
You will.
your order is now 12:03. It actually even calculates the time here. I actually give you how you calculate the time. So it's real time, it's actually right. 5:20 is ready by 5:40. I give you some of this code, and I give you some hints and instructions on how to do this thing. There's clearly a lot going on here. Let's start with going back to this. ID.
Dipesh Puri.
Yes.
Puri.
Let's just stop right here, Dipesh.
Boiled rice.
How is that number built on?
It's increasing.
Think about our scopes. I want to talk about scopes.
Application state.
Okay, the name Dipesh is probably in the section. And the order number 12004 is going to be in the section. In fact, that's,
Yeah.
you never see Dipesh, it's actually the whole order number is in the section. But what about this number 12,000, 12,001, 12,002, 12,003, 12,004?
Is incrementing by.
It's one of those things like getting your bank account numbers and your student numbers next one up. How do we do that?
Application state.
You need all three scopes. You need to have some sort of counter which starts at 1200 arbitrarily and adds one each time. So I'm going to take that as the start point for talking about scopes. Then hopefully I've got time to talk about how you do these loops, how you do this formatting, and there's a lot of stuff in here. So the time you've done, assignment 5's got kind of like everything in it, so it's big. But by the time you've done it, you've done something of everything that you might have to do on the file, or the video. But you obviously want to do everything on return, because there's too much in here, so some consider a good assignment. Okay, so let me go back to the slides
Ben, come on, Ben.
and go right to the end, and then we'll come back to doing on JSP Syntax. State. And I think you know about this. I'm hoping I can do this quickly because we covered states in ASP and ASP.NET. It's the syntax, the concepts are the same. And part of the reason I did that diagram over there is I want to use it. I don't know how much they explained this in the previous course. One of my colors over here. We have see, there's lots of places you can put data. There's 5 different places you can put data. Well, there's 6, really. If you include cookies, you could store it on the client. But that is so deprecated and so bad, we don't even mention it, right? You don't want data flowing up and down the line. We have what we call temporary state. And that means basically your stateless. This is what we had in the call. We just had what we call request scope. We could pass information. As long as we stayed on the server side, we could pass information from the JSP to the server. We did that in the clock by using request scope. Request scope is something that the web container gives us. As soon as something comes in at this point, we have the request object. It's got more than just the HTTP request object, it's got extra features. And we can use it, so we can store information in request scope. When we go back, at this point here with the response, that JSP expressions and anything that's in there is converted to HTML, and request scope disappears. So from here to here is the lifespan of request scope. And in fact, if you do forward, you can actually forward from one JSP to another, to another server to another server. You can bounce around in the web container. Usually you just go serve it to JSP, but you can bounce around as you, as long as it's the same request, you've got that scope to store information in and get information out of it. Usually you don't take anything out of it because it's just serve it to JSP. That's request scope. Gives you stateless, which is all that you get with HTTP. How does that work? And basically, the web container has a bunch of services for you beyond just a simple container. It contains a map. Or think of it as a map, as you know of maps. It's a little table of information. And what we did in the clock is we put in something, we called it time. That was the name of the information, right? Gave it a name, current time we called it, but I can't put current in that tiny little box. And this was the actual, time information. So we can put any kind of an object in one of these slots, and we have to give it a key, which has to be a string. It's a name value pair, it's a map. So what we do in our servlet is we call set attribute on the request object, and then we put in it, ABC is what we're going to call it, and there's some object called letters which goes in there. So this is the name of some object, right? That's how we get it in. How we get it out in the JSP page, or how it gets resolved by the web container when the message goes back, is in an expression. Oh, you don't need the quotes, just ABC. And bingo, whatever letters are in this string here is suddenly in your HTML. That's how that works. Okay, that's one of them. That's what we call stateless temporary data. The next one you're very familiar with, because you're used to this from web apps. Thank you, everybody. Time. Is data that's associated with the user. Session scope. The HTTP session object. I want another color. So, web browsers know from the header the IP address of this machine. They also even know identifying information of the browser session. So if I open two different browsers on my machine, and I've shown you that, I get separate conversations, right? Not just the machine. This information gets encoded in the header, and as soon as a new user comes in, the first time, web container makes a brand new map, works exactly like the other map, but it's now called the HTTP session object, session scope. You put in things to put data in session scope. Now, this is a variable name session, so I'm just using that. It might be a different name. And to get it out, this is a reserved name in a JSP page. Works exactly the same way. The syntax is exactly the same. The difference is how long do these sessions, these scopes last? Basically, they last until this person goes away. When do they stop existing? There's two ways session scope can disappear. One is you can do it programmatically, and I'll show you how. I'll show you how right now. Your servlet can call a message servlet session.invalidate. So you can programmatically kill the session. That's like a log out system. But very often people don't log out from websites, they just wander, right? And eventually the server realizes, oh, I haven't had any action from IP so-and-so for a while, and they time it. But it lives until either timeout or explicit invalidation happens, which is how you maintain conversations. If you can, it's always preferable to use request scope because it disappears very quickly, and this can become a bit of a memory hog. Don't throw everything in session scope because you can, because you're hanging on to that stuff. Sometimes it takes half an hour before they realize the person's not coming back. Right? And if it'll go in request scope, leave it there because it gets cleaned up quickly. Very transitory. So that's, if you can do it, put it in request scope and run stateless. Only things you have to remember go into session scope. Now we have the third one, which is called application scope. It's another map. In a servlet, it's called the servlet context. We're getting to show the history here and how long this API has been around, because the naming convention is all over the place. The servlets are called the servlet context, and in JSP expression language, it's called application scope. But the syntax for doing them is exactly the same. We stick something in with a name value pair. Any kind of object, it has to be an object. The number, use uppercase integer rather than int, that kind of thing. And then you get things out of the same object. So those are the ones you choose. Sometimes the choice between using application scope becomes a choice between should it be an application scope or should it be in a database. Or sometimes session scope even, that's a decision, that's a design decision. Which is better? Someone's playing a game, for example, and you want to remember the moves, the layout of the board, however the game is at any point in time. Where do you put that? You put that in the session, because that could be a lot of information. Or do you maintain a database? And it might depend upon the nature of the game. If it was a chess game, where we might make a move, one move every 3 months, clearly it's going to have to be in a database, right? But if it's a card game, you expect to move a minute. Who knows? So often it's a design decision. That's what you've got, and you've even got enterprise systems. So that's sort of theory. You can run over the theory. So these are the contexts. Request scope, session scope, application scope. They have different names in the servlets. Here's an example of using the session. So we're in a servlet. We use, this is the argument of the servlet. Remember the first argument? Get session. And we get an object of type HTTP session. Usually programmers call it session, but that's just a local variable name. So you can call it what you want to call it. Right? Once we got the session, we can put something into it, anything we want. And if someone previously put something into it, we can get it out. Now, we always get out as an object, okay? So we're going to have to pass it to something. Right? These are just objects. But you don't have generics. It's old API. Before there were generics, we have to pass them. And that's how we use it. Okay, but that's familiar stuff. So everybody's happy with this. I just want to keep moving because I want to get through as much of this as possible. There's some API you can call in the session. You want to programmatically invalidate it because the user's logged in. What that actually does is it just takes the whole session and erases everything in it. If you want to just take one object out of the, you've got a lot of objects in this session, you can actually do this. Is the colors are over the place. Session dot set attribute set there. ABC. That's the way of erasing just one of it. If you want to get rid of the whole thing, like someone's logged out, you use validate. The rest of these you're not likely to use on this course. And I actually advocate you don't use isn't. I'm going to teach you a different way of doing that. If you get hung up on reading the API, they do all about how do you find it if this is a new session. I'll show you how to do it the most robust way. Here's the example. Now this might be a little hard to follow. So it's color-coded. The idea here is how do you tell if someone's a new user or if they've already logged in? And the idea is the first time they go in, You put their name or their user ID or something, like their order ID, you sign up live into the session. Then every other time someone comes in, you say, what's the order ID? And if it's no, you know this is the first time. So here's the sample code. So we're going to do post method. We get the session object. And we find out whether this is the first entry point. If the user ID has been stored already, that's not going to be no. Now, first time in, they did the orange bit. First time in, the login servlet said, get your name from the entry field and stored it in the session. So it's doing that all in one field. So this happened first. Later times, it came into the servlet and it's not no. So you went off and you did whatever you wanted. If it is no, other servlets continue normally. If it's no, and you want them to be logged in, you send them to the login page. Other servlets than the login servlet will say, hey, if it's no, you haven't logged in, you have to log in. And you send them off to the login page. So reading this is a little tricky because of the color coding. If it's not no, there's an error because you've already logged in. You know, if you're on the login page and someone's already logged in, you say, hey, you're already logged in. But if you follow the colors through this, that's how it works. So you've seen this example of this. I'm not even going to talk about cookies because we're not doing them. There's a little summary of your scopes. So all in one page, how to get hold of them. The words are in the JSP, the magic words, the scope. So application scope, I'll come back to that. Now, there's another scope for JSP pages that I'm not going to mention. It's called page scope. It basically just means in the scope of this page, it's default. I'll show you in a minute or two how you declare variables in the JSP page. For use in that JSP page, by adding up the total value of a order, you have to create a variable and you have to add to it. That would be in page scope because it's only within this one page. So. Give the kid. Is this all fun? I mean, I am only going to go through a lot of stuff, but that's basically the story on scopes. The last thing I'm going to say is, how long does this work? Application scope. Have you hit this before? Do you have this in .NET? Talk about it in .NET. I know you've got it. This application scope. Application scope comes into being when the web app is deployed. When the application server administrator says, start this application. Start it. And it stays there until the application server administrator undeploys it. Now, in your case, during development, you undeploy, redeploy, undeploy, redeploy, so it doesn't last very long. But in a real production environment, it might hang around for months and months, maybe even years. So if you get something like a web app, chat room, it says, so far, 5,473 people have visited this chat room. Where is that number stored? Application scope. And that number will just grow and grow and grow. And in assignment here, the 1200 number, the counter, is in application scope. So if you'll calculate on the previous page, well, actually, it's calculated for display on this page. This is the order page. You'll take this number of application scope, add one to it. I'll show you how to do that in JSP syntax. Throw it back in application scope. Actually, you add to that in the servlet. This is to be the logic in the servlet. You'll take the username, you concat it to the bus. And that's the thing that combined thing is what is stored in sections. The very minimum of an application scope. Because application scope can hang around for months with the life of the application, and it can just kill your server. Don't dump stuff in there. It's a safe place to dump it. Because when you have long-running applications with lots of users, not hogging memory on the server is a big aspect. Okay. So, let's pause. We're ready to get into JSP syntax now. Because you gotta do both or you can't do anything. That's MVC. You gotta do them both. So look what we've got here in the way of syntax. We've got this loop through this array, print out all the items. We've got formatting a number of currencies. We've got all the stuff going on here. And I haven't told you how to do any of it. Okay, I'm not going to go on about how this is about the specification that we evolved. I will say one thing though. It has evolved. Every couple of years they come out with some new improvements and they deprecate some old stuff. And one of the first things that went was the ability to drop the Java right on the JS3 page. And I tell you this because if I see assignments for jig managers with code like this in them, it's a 0. It means that what you've done is you've copied some code that you looked up something on the source. What do you call that source code? Stack trace, an example, and you found an old one. Or even worse, you've got a friend that used to do this 5 years ago, and he wrote the code for you. I mean, it's a dead giveaway for cheating. Do not put Java code in your JSP page. You switch from HTML to Java with this percent, angle bracket percent. And here's an example. For example, we want to loop through an array. Used to be this is what you had to do. We now have tags for this. We can now do it in JSP syntax. You don't have to drop into Java. Very awkward. It breaks MVC. Breaks MVC. That's the reason why I condemn on that view regarding. It means whoever wrote this page has to be a Java programmer as well as an HTML author, and that's misuse of your resources, misuse of your personnel. So it's not allowed in this course, and it says clearly on this slide, don't do it. It's a sheer sign that you didn't learn this. Use the tags I'm teaching. There's other tags too, and I'm not even going to show you two. There's other tags that just give it away. You got this code out of some example you found online or from a friend, and it's not the code that I teach. I teach what's current, what's carried forward in the JSF syntax. Moving forward, I don't teach what's deprecated. If I see deprecate tagging, I mean, it still works. It's still in the standard. They don't take it out. You can't change the standard so that it breaks stuff that's not working. So they still work. But if I see this kind of stuff, got it here. So there are some small legacies of Java code that remain just because they haven't got a new syntax allowed for it. And one of them is this page directive. These directives, the @ sign, you see them on every page. And it's kind of part of the prologue header. Comes with every page that's generated has this page directive. For example, if I look at the source of this page here, which is the web content, the order form, you look right at the top, what's there? A page directive generated for you. You're not going to lose marks for that. There's no replacement. You have to have a page directive. The other thing, if you want to use things like looping, you have to use these tag libraries. don't drop into Java. The modern way to do it is to use these tag libraries. Now, these tag libraries are actually implemented in Java. I'm not going to get into what's going on behind the scenes, but basically, every JSP page is compiled into a servlet and runs to a servlet on the other server. On the server, they're all servlets. It's how they're authored. That's why it used to work. You could jump in and do it. So, if you want to use loops, conditionals, all the things that you have to do in assignment 4 and 5, you're using the tag libraries. And these two here are the two that you have to use for assignment 4 and 5 and the midterm. And you declare them with the tag declaration, just like here at the top of the file. So that's the only place I will accept angle bracket percent declarations that you have no choice, nowhere else. Some of these reserved variables. Remember this oddball expression that resolves to the current context root? These two are a legacy of the old Java. Use it. That's why I say just use it. Just remember that's what the expression is. You're not going to use those keywords anywhere else. You use it for the context. Now let's look at JSP expression languages a little bit more. JSP expression language actually carries over into Java server faces. The only difference is in Java server faces, the syntax is this. Instead of the dollar sign of the hash mark. The reason is Java server faces generate JavaScript. Java server faces are much more modern, which means that when you get back on the client side, there's JavaScript running, and the value in these fields may be changed by that JavaScript. So what that hash mark actually means is a little value, I guess, when the page is sent back. When JavaScript runs, it may change, because that's what JavaScript does. Now, we don't have that with old-fashioned JSPs. We just have, we just have this syntax here, which means this expression gets resolved at this point here, and it is fixed. And we're just stuck with that. But that's why this is a good way of going, because it's the syntax that carries forward the frameworks. Much more flexible than using deprecated tags. And you can do anything in here. Evaluate an expression. Conditional. Here's something similar to what we've seen before. This is the scope something is in, and that's the object, and that's the object's current value. So how do you parse the syntax for this? First off, usually and almost always in your situations, this expression will start with what scope is this stored in? Session scope, application scope, request scope. Then there'll be what's the name? This is the name here, at current time. Not the name of a class, it's not the name of a variable, it's the name of the key in the map. These three maps, right? Now, at this point, let's assume this is something like a shopping cart. But in the servlet, the type of this object is shopping cart, right? When they put it in the request scope, they just called it cart. The shopping cart class has a field, number of items. So that's actually the name of the field and the type of this class. So this gets a little, for a Java programmer, this gets a little, get your head around it. What you tell the JSP people is that carts have things called numbers of items. That's all they need to know. But for a Java programmer, what you want to know is that's actually an object of type shopping cart, and it has a get number of items method. The rule is, as long as there's a getter, Java being standard, you can put a field name in there. You'll run the getter, get out the value, and that's what comes out of it. So here we get the number of items in a shopping cart. These are the scopes you can have. Page scope we will not use on this course. So these are the three we've talked about. And page scope basically means in this page. There's more of these predefined variables. Most of them mean you're breaking MVC. For example, if you're reading parameters in a JSP page, you shouldn't be. JSP pages are for output, they're not for input. So you can break MVC, but there's all the power you need to do things wrong. And some of these methods, if you're using these things like creating colors in a JSP page, what on earth are you doing? So I put little marks beside the ones that do not use them. They're just there because they've been there since the dawn of time. So JSP expression language, here's a good example. So in a servlet, we get a session object. We read from a form. There's an entry field called first, there's an entry field called last. We get some values and their strings, first name, last name. We build a person object from the first name and last name. We call the person object who, that's the identifier, so that's the object. We put it in session scope with the name user. The identifier for the object is who, but that gets lost. It's a person object. That's the thing you gotta know. Now we're in the JSP page. So, hello, regular HTML, session scope, that's where we get it. User. Person. Get person. It's a getter. Field. So we've jumped from, for a Java person, this can be a little bit of a heady thing, because you've jumped from the name of the field calling a getter to the name of the key in a map. What scope is it stored in? So you just teach JSP people, call that, it's got one of these. Now you can put anything that's got a getter, you can chain things along. You can actually dot rotation, bring things up. Pretty powerful stuff. How many phone messages I have? So this is, I presume, a list, and the list has a size method. If you don't have a getter, you actually put the braces in, and we call them method. Braces. Those things parameters. Parameters. Parentheses. If you don't have a getter, you have to have the parentheses. Say, oh, that's a method call. That's getting a little gray. It looks a little jelly-ish, but you know, that's the best we can have. The standard is evolving. That's what we're working on. Now, one of the nice things about it is that there is no user. If this is not there, you never get a null pointer exception. JSP expression language is very robust. It's designed. It's very. There's a lot of things you're not allowed to do in Java, like you're allowed to use equals equals for comparing objects. It's not strict typing. You don't get class cast errors. It just does the best it can. Things like that. And it never gives you null pointer exception. If there's a null anywhere along here, it's nothing. You never get a nasty message like null pointer exception. And you can use that. I'll show you that for error handling. We can play tricks with this. And that's kind of another nice thing I want to show you. That's expression language. You will probably always do fairly straightforward things like this. You're not going to do some of the sort of strange arithmetic type things like that. But you will have to calculate that total cost. That's the one thing that you can't get quickly. For that, you're going to have to use multi-type. Okay, another big pause, because I'm trying to get through this today because we've only got one day next week, and I want you to have seen all this at least once, even at the risk of just because we'll go over it again on Monday next week. So you'll hear it again, you'll know where it is in the slides, and then for the test, because I just know this is more than you can remember. All coming down now. Expression language is quite powerful and becomes quite powerful, mainly for passive data. Hey guys, don't talk back there, unless it's something you want to share with the class. So expression language is mainly in that context of passing information from the server to the JSP and then displaying it. If you want to do other kind of programming things, you need the standard tag libraries. For example, there is nothing in HTML that all programming languages have. Fundamental to all programming languages is some way of writing a loop. There's nothing remotely resembling a loop in HTML. It's an XML document. It's not a programming language. There's no way you can do a conditional in HTML. They just don't exist. And the old solution was to drop into Java. Long decade. That's been replaced completely by these tag libraries. And I want to show you the ones you need to use. There's 5 standard libraries, 3 of which are useful, 2 of which I'm saying don't even use them, they break MVC. If you're doing SQL from your JSP pages, you are so far out of JSP, out of MVC that, wow, you know? Because the thing is, everything you can do in a servlet, you can do in a Java server page. Everything you can do in a Java server page, you can do in a servlet, but you shouldn't. MVC is separating them. Similar, if you're doing XML in a JSP page, what on earth are you doing? You know, seriously. Okay. So the function libraries that might be useful is the core library is all the standard stuff that you'd expect any programming language to have, but conditionals, loops, setting variables, creating variables, declaring variables. The syntax is awful for a programmer because it's done in XML syntax, so it's very long-winded, but that's where you do it. You use the core library. Now this statement here, you simply put this declaration at the top of the file. I say put them before the body tag. The rule is anywhere before you use the tag. And what it basically is saying is any tag that starts with a C colon, for example, if I want to do an if, I would start my tag with C colon if. The condition. And then I have to go, the attribute of this if tag is test equals, and then I have to put the attribute. This would be the condition, like C, A greater than 3, right? And then I could write out something like paragraph tag, A is greater than 3. Okay, something like that. You know, I might write down like. So that's how I coded the condition. A is. I don't use that. The angle brackets are a problem. Angle bracket GT. That's the little symbol for an angle bracket. Right? So I just said something. End if. Very long-winded format. It's XML format. Tag with attributes, values in quotes. Regular HTML, end of tag. Every tag is done in. So all that kind of thing is in the standard library. In order to enable this tag, you have to have this declaration so it knows what the C is all about. Top of the file. If you're doing formatting, for example, getting those numbers into currency format, we've got tags from the formatting library, and you've got a bunch of functions in the function library where you identify the tags with FN. We won't be doing any of those. I can't think of a need for any of these on this course. Because the reason I can't think of a need is it's the servlet that builds the order number, right? And then it stores the order number in session scope. If the JSP had to build that order number, it would be using those functions. So let's see some examples. Now this is a lot, and the thing is I'm showing you the examples so you know where the examples are. Here's an if statement. There's no if else. There's no else. If you want to do an else, you have to do a choose. In which case you got a cascading any number of options. So here's this example here. If test request scope guess, so that's whatever the user, I presume, entered something in under the name guess equals banana. Nice simple syntax here, we can use equals equals, that's fine. You guessed it. Should be it. Note here, again, XML syntax, not programming. Attributes have to be in quotes. Attributes of tags. This is an attribute of the if tag. But we have a problem because we've got a string inside quotes. And we use the single quotes. You can do it the other way around. You can put the single quote on the outside, the double quote on the inside. Your choice. You have trouble if you get too much nesting. You get really into a mess nesting. If you want to do an else, you do something like this. You just, for a simple else, you just have a choose, when, and otherwise. Here's an example. We're choosing choose when. This is an example of swapping around the quotes, so the double quotes on the inside. If the user is a variable, I haven't yet showed you how to declare one, but you can. And the field type is novice, full help is provided. If the user type is expert, no help is provided. Otherwise, brief help is provided. So this is kind of a scoop up, the default for the class. Which, I mean, so you've got those. So to be else, looping. You probably won't do this kind of looping, but this is the kind I got for I equals 1, comma 10, go to step 2, increments of 2. So that's how you do a simple loop. You will see for each, declare a var, the begin and the end. Anybody done, there's a language called Pascal that's kind of like this. Looks a little bit like Pascal. It doesn't look like C. What's the output of this loop? Oh, C.out doesn't do anything. It just outputs the value, which is what happens anyway. Just to show you, you get another tag after the C.out. So the C.out and the end C.out just output the result of what's in the middle, which is what happens anyway. The C.out is kind of superfluous here. So, value, var equals I. Oh, so the value that C.out prints is the value of I, followed by value of I times I, with a space in between. So here we have I is 1, 1 squared is 1, step 2. I is 3, I squared is 3, 9, 5, I squared is 25. So on. You're not going to do that kind of thing, but you can. What you are going to do a lot of is this sort of thing. This is how we did the go. This is how we're doing this array here of the types. Go back to the let's go back. That's how we're doing this here. Okay. Here we have the loop that's going down, and then across we're taking each field. So what does that look like? This is a similar example. So what we're doing is we're going through some portfolio of stocks. So we have a table with a header, stock symbol, stock price. Then we have a for each. So there's going to be a row for every other stock. Row and row. Then there's a cell with a symbol. There's a cell for the price, $1.25. End of for each. So we'll go down around this for each until we're finished. And there's the end of the table. So that's actually putting the form inside the table. That's roughly equivalent, not to this kind of a, you can imagine that's kind of like for I equals, the first one up top would be equivalent to for I equals 1, I less than 11, I guess it would be. I plus equals 2. That's what that top one represents. The bottom one is more like, bottom one is more like for stock, that's stock, colon, portfolio. That's for this kind of one. We do this in Java. This is the kind of thing you're going to do more on. So here we have portfolio happens to be lots of request scope. So this thing items with the S is that thing, which you're looping through. Then this thing called var is what your counter, and your counter is called stock. So we kind of declared a variable called stock with this var equals stock. So that's the kind of loop you're going to use. So you know where it is. You know where it is. I'm just going to keep moving along because it's after 6. I have a few more of these to go through. Now, what about variables? You do need a variable. How are we going to add up this price? Clearly, in a programming language, that's not a big problem. You simply say total cost equals 0, or as you go through your order, cost equals cost plus cost of this item times quantity of this item. Okay. You may want to code this, but coding this in JSP language, tag library is just long-winded. Not conceptually difficult, but it's just hits in terms of syntax. So first off, just declaring a variable. C colon set, I'm declaring a variable. Remember in basic we used to say let, I equals 3, something like the let. Okay. Var, it's a variable, that's its name. Let, time zone, you know. Scope, you've got a choice of scopes. You are only going to use page scope in a JSP, but you can use different scopes. You can actually put information in session scope if you want to in a JSP. But we're only going to use our JSPs for displaying output. So we'll only be creating variables in JSP in page scope. In value equals CST. So when you set up a variable, that's the equivalent of saying time zone equals Central Standard Time. It's very goosey about typing. Goose typing, not strict typing, not Java. Here's another one. Set side to be the length of one side of a box. So this is a thing box of request scope. If we can actually delete one, this is you to remove a variable. Here we are saying the side is 1 plus whatever side was before. Adding to our counter. We do calculations like here. The value of side times side, that should be the area, I suppose. Wait. We've got this default option here just to show you what yes. Page scope is the default, and I would point in red. You happy with this? Because I know I'm kind of losing. I know you've been asleep. The last thing you're going to have to do, I'm going to have to stop the sim when you're running out of time, and I know I've lost you. I just want you to see this stuff, see where it is. When you're doing assignment 5, go, yeah, that's on a slide somewhere. And I want to save a few minutes to show you where it is in the examples as well, because you've got some example code. What you want to do in formatting currencies, you want this one. So you're going to calculate the price and or the BMI. Assignment 4, you want this one because you want to just do something accurate and how many digits. Your BMI may be some 17.49, you know, one of those. Ridiculous. You just want to say 17.4. You say max fraction is 1. you say format number, type equals number for BMI, value equals BMI. You will get out of session scope, or request scope, probably request scope. I can show you that one. So you want that one for the BMI value to get 1 digit, and you want this one for the cost of the order to get in currency format. And again, to use any of these, you have to have the appropriate tag lid declaration, and it says that in the instruction. Now, I'm inconsistent, but most places in the instructions, if you have to use one of these tags, I tell you. At least I say use the c.if tag, or use the c.forEach tag. At least you know which tag you're looking for. And on the exam, if it's particularly tricky, I'll maybe give it to you. So those are the formatting libraries. The function libraries, I don't know, there's some examples there, but I'm not going to talk about things I'm not going to use. Some more examples. Oh! This is a good example. This comes from the extended clock. You've got the instructions for creating the extended clock. It's in Bonnie's manual. And I'm just going to run it till I get to a point where I can send it. So who runs the extended clock? Now, the first thing the extended clock does is lets you choose your locale. In other words, what language do you want the time to do that in? It always takes so long. This is what you